I have a question. I want to know, what do you all think is the biggest challenge right now in security for just even a basic checking account? Anyone want to take that? Jamie?
Basic check. I mean, in basic checking account security.
We can't hear you. Sorry.
Okay. You tell me.
It's coming.
How's that?
You just,
Better? Better?
No.
He's working on it.
that,
There we go.
Yeah, better.
And I am not a security fraud expert across the entire bank network, so but I believe that money laundering and just fraudulent checking account opening is the number one issue there. So fraudulent checking accounts, what people don't realize is most people outside of the industry, we actually pull a FICO score, a credit score on people to open a checking account. We won't open a checking account for just anyone. There are people for whom they're not credit worthy to even have a checking account, which sounds counterintuitive, but there's risk associated with that. And so, you know, to some of what Jim was showing with the fees and all that on the credit side, those fees, what do those fees go toward? They're not just for us to line our pockets. They go toward covering fraud losses and the like. They go toward reward points and miles. On the checking side, it's the same thing. And so just straight up fraudulent checking account opening and people writing bad checks, passing bad checks, and defaulting is the biggest risk we face.
So I would take a different thing. I would say people are the biggest problem. Honestly, as people, most of the population is not as technologically savvy as probably most of the folks in this room. There is not an understanding of what truly creates security and what doesn't. One of my favorite studies shows that if you make up a fake security certificate, make sure it has a lock in the image, put this image on your web page, conversions will go up, and people will feel the page is more secure. So until we know as people what's really secure and what's not, we can only keep upping the game so much on actual security.
hey, I'm going to open it up. Can you stand up and enunciate?
Sure. I do understand that banking websites need to have a lot of information on their websites. They should be very clear as to what they are. Information is very important. It's very text heavy. Everything is there. So when you move on to a mobile application or something with your mobile, how do you decide on what is important and what is not?
I guess I can speak to that a little bit. We do test quite a bit, especially with mobile. And one of the things we measure for is comprehension. So part of what drives what ends up on the UI at the end is what tested well and what actually aided somebody to get through and complete a task. Anything that didn't help measurably is gone.
I would say it's almost a tale of two environments in the sense that in the authenticated side of it, where you're actually doing banking and looking at accounts and so forth, you're presenting transactional data. So while there's a lot of data, it's organized and logical, and you can swipe, and that's pretty straightforward. On the sales side, it's more challenging because you have to present the product information, and then you have to present it in an actually legally regulated way. The Schumer box, Charles Schumer. So all these things get ascribed to different senators all the time, or people in the House. So, and you know what their approval rating is. So you end up, and actually some of it was for financial clarity reasons, and actually did help with that, with people understanding the terms and conditions of what they were signing up for. But there's actually a legally prescribed way that you have to present the information. So some of that information is to the slide with all the regulators. You can't get around it. You have to show it. So people have to take that step. Nobody thinks that they're reading it. We know they're not reading it. What I think a lot of the banks have tried to do is skinny down the important salient points. What's the teaser rate? What's the duration of the teaser rate? What's the actual rate after that? Speaking on credit cards specifically, all of that's contained in the long disclosure deal, but nobody reads that part. So we're trying to surface the key elements for people and make it easy for them to make a decision.
What I would add to this is it also depends on, the fundamental question is, why is the user there? Why is the user at that page? There should be one primary reason, maybe a secondary reason or two, but one primary reason why the user's there at that page. What does the user need in order to do whatever they came there to do? And that's your minimal viable product. There may be other platforms where you offer more information, some where you offer less, but it really comes down to user need and meeting that need.
Okay, we've got a question back here.
So my name's Caesar, and I have a question to the PayPal guy. What do you see doing location-enabled payments? Like, what type of companies? We're talking just a MasterCard, PayPal, Starbucks, can you give me an insight? Just like an idea.
So, Apple's Passbook is location-enabled payments. Starbucks today announced their location-enabled payments. This really is rapidly rolling out. And I think as we see things like Passbook catching on, and Passbook does have a pretty large user base to start with, we'll see more and more companies rolling it out.
So would it be the device then?
Yeah, well, to use another app example that is really popular in the Bay Area is Level Up. So Level Up is location enabled to actually give you to show you on the map what restaurants accept Level Up as a payment device, and then it would be a very easy bridge. I mean, you basically you're paying at that restaurant. So I mean, it's absolute one for one, right? It's giving you the location of the restaurant, and then you're making a payment at that restaurant, and it's got access to your GPS. So you've granted that access. So it's, I mean, to Jim's point about the security, it's ultra secure. I mean, you have a very, very, very high level of confidence in that transaction.
We have a question here.
Hi, Richard Keeves. So based on the mobile wallet solutions that are either out on the market or that have been announced, which do you think is most likely to succeed and why?
PayPal, of course. What a silly question. A lot of the solutions really are very different, relying on very different technologies, and frankly, it's hard to predict the future.
Yeah, there are two. So there are two principal mechanisms that are in play for mobile payments. So there are a multitude of companies that want to control the digital wallet. So the digital wallet, Google has a wallet, banks will have wallets, PayPal will have a wallet. Everybody's got a wallet. They're all going to do pretty much the same things. You're going to be able to enter your cards, your loyalty cards, store that. You'll get offers. You'll have location-aware services that help you. But when it comes down to the actual payment, it's either NFC, near-field communication, which requires access to the secure element in the phone. It requires an NFC-enabled phone, of which there are very few in the market today. That's the one form factor. There are very good reasons it's beneficial from a location-aware security perspective to do it that way. The countervailing solution is the QR codes, which is what Level Up is doing and what the Starbucks mobile app uses. And that one's a little bit easier. You need a 2D barcode reader at the point of sale, just like you need an NFC-enabled point of sale terminal. So you have a terminal issue and you have a device issue. And that's why mobile payments are such a very, very small portion of the market today. Nobody really knows. I mean, predicting the future on this one, it's really a roll of the dice as to which one will survive. Some people, maybe to try to drive the conversation, have been calling NFC the Betamax of mobile payments.
I would add, ours is not NFC. I would add there's another major difference that we're seeing out there, which is whether financial information is stored on the device or in the cloud. Ours is in the cloud. I'd argue that's better for a lot of reasons, mainly around what if you do lose that phone. But again, it's a very dynamic market right now.
Yeah, and to clarify, so like Level Up is tying the QR code to your credit card, but it is doing it in the cloud. So there's nothing actually stored. The QR code is sort of meaningless without that connectivity. So if you lose your phone, you can disable it, and it's secure. So it's similar. So people have approached it similarly from that perspective.
I'll make a prediction and say that Apple wins.
So, really quick, for David. So I actually love what Square is actually doing, and I'm a big Starbucks junkie, so I just don't see, I mean, it seems like the numbers that you guys put up there for the banks, the differences between the percentages of what people pay, is there sort of a non-incentive for the banks not to go in that direction because they're making more money in you know, the status quo, so to speak?
No, because we're in a competitive landscape. Somebody is going to go in that direction, and it's a matter of who can do the best job at it. And I would argue, again, the glories of PayPal, we have a very good risk team. That's definitely one of the places we've invested heavily.
So, yeah, I mean, the fundamentals, PayPal is an alternative payment network. So what was being shown is the kind of traditional credit card payment network, and the fees are called interchange revenue, and the interchange fees, and that's what that fee paid by the merchants. PayPal's alternative payment network also charges a fee. It's undercutting the traditional credit card interchange revenue, but it's still charging the merchants a fee. That's where PayPal's revenue comes from, is from those merchants. The credit card companies obviously try to incent customers to use, Visa is a worldwide brand and actually has a great brand both recognition and advocacy. It's that interchange fee is what funds your miles. If you like getting your miles and your points, that's where it's coming from, is the merchants paying Visa and then ultimately back through the issuing banks and to you as a customer in the form of points. But the network, there is competitive pressure, absolutely. I mean, that is the game. And the more consolidation in the retail space, i.e. Walmarts and Targets, and the more big box retailers have control and really dominate that space, the more pressure there is for these alternative payment networks. So interchange, to put it into context for Walmart, interchange is the number 2 expense after cost of goods, or number 3 after cost of goods and personnel. So if they're looking at how to, right, so if you're looking at, right, yeah, so that dollar, that 1.2%, 1.25%, it's real money. It's big time. So, that was a great example of the power of 0.05%, right, to a big box retailer. So PayPal coming in, so it's a competitive landscape. So
I'd say it's growing even more with startups like WUD.
Yeah.
Where it's truly an alternative. I mean, you're just kind of circumventing the traditional system, right?
Absolutely. It's WUD, for folks who haven't experienced it, is another alternative payments network. It's done really, really well. It's primarily started up as a P2P, a la PayPal, and WUD has a set fee, 25 cents. Their thing is you can move as much money as you want to for 25 cents. But they want their 25 cents.
And I think the one thing I would add to this competitive pressure is companies undercutting rates better be able to provide the risk management to support it. You never want to offer rates that you can't pay your own losses with.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Hi guys, my name is Farouk. I'm starting a new insurance startup. I need your suggestion from the security standpoint of view, from the UX, UI, when consumer is filling out a form. What sense do you guys suggest, or how to look into it? Consumer feels safe when they're putting the first name, last name, driver license, date of birth, and so on. And it's a start, right? So what do you recommend?
This is one I've done a lot of research on. Bottom line is, if you don't need it, don't ask for it until you need it. If you really do need it, explain why. When you talk to your customers as if they're intelligent human beings, and you say, in our field, we need your social security number because federal regulations require us to know who you are, generally, they're pretty receptive. They get that. It makes sense. But if you just say, give me your social security number, I want it, then the customers tend to
I'm
buy.
gonna jump in. What if, for a bank of the West, it's a big brand, people want secure point of management, putting social security blank side. If you go to a different website, never heard of it before, I don't want to be my driver license or anything, but even if I explain it, how do you?
I think there's both. You have a huge barrier, right? Because if no one knows who you are, unless there's a really strong motivator to sign up for your service, it's going to be tough to collect sensitive data. I would say one of the things we kind of touched on, or someone touched on it earlier about having like a padlock. That kind of stuff, you could, you have to actually back that up with something. If you have some sort of third-party validation, some sort of... I have a HostGator account too, it's like $5 a month. I mean, you have to be... I get it, but that's why I would suggest if you're really, what kind of data are you collecting? Like what's everything else? Like insurance. Oh, for insurance?
And I think I would emphasize Sean's point here is, do you need that information? Do you really need it, or do you just think you need it? Ask the really critical questions. What's the bare minimum information you really need at that point in time? You can always ask for more information later if you really need it. And if you do need it, you're going to have a really good value prop.
Yeah, well, exactly, and one way you can do that also is to provide some value up front before collecting any information. If you can provide some small amount of value to them before...
Yeah, that would be good. But you are in the you are in that sort of frontal assault on security lane, and so I mean, you have to put that, you have to present it as secure. You have to explain why you need it, and you need to have the supporting content on your website that builds confidence in the fact that you're a legit service, and and have that privacy security center available so people understand what you do, what steps you take to help protect their information. Those things, I made light of it a little bit, but they actually are important tactics. They're important steps. PayPal has the same content. We all do it because you need to, and it has to be legit, right? It has to be that you actually are doing these things. Yeah. So yeah.
We have a question right here.
Good evening. My name is Ty. Thank you three for coming. One to each, because you all are in different verticals. For Sean, how do you get your SMEs to listen to the data that you presented and do it? For Jamie, seeing new opportunities to address customers' pain points, a la Mint plus banking. How do you get regulators and agencies to adopt? And then for Jim, the location-enabled payments, Square, particularly in this space, does PayPal have plans to use your economies of scale, plus the enablement of a social graphic scale as well?
Say the last part of that again.
I said for PayPal, location-enabled payments, plus and Square in this space, does PayPal have plans to use your economies of scale, plus the enablement of a social graph to scale into this particular vertical?
I think you said SMEs, right? Subject matter. So for the uninitiated, as subject matter experts, and we have bevies of them running around the bank, and subject matter expert, I think, is they use that liberally, but yeah, it's people who are supposed to know something about a particular area of the business, and a lot of times it's like a risk person. So I'll use the example that I used earlier, which is when we were asking if people were a foreign political official, they said we have to have that. We absolutely have to have that. So then when we ran the test, I made sure to have other SMEs in the room whose primary motivator was making money or higher conversions, and showed them that we had an 80% plus fail rate when people got to that. It was a bailout. People would bail on that question. And we tested that. So sometimes it's good to have multiple people in the room where there's going to be some tension between their interests and in that case, the bottom line wins out almost always. So that's...
And so in terms of getting regulators on board, one of the primary regulatory groups that we would work with would be the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB. And so their goal is to protect consumers. So it's not that hard to get them on board with what we'd be trying to do, because in fact, what we're trying to do is the same thing, right? Our goals are aligned. We're trying to give customers better tools and solutions to help them manage their financial lives. So it falls directly in line with that. There's a little bit of a discussion around, aggregation and what are we doing with the data, right? But that's actually all regulated too in terms of affiliate sharing and what we can and cannot do with information behind the scenes. So it's not that's not as big a hurdle to drive sort of more innovative solutions in that space forward.
And in terms of location-enabled payments, if you download the PayPal app, it's already there. You can already go in and start using it. I think the entire space has a long ways to go until the customer experience is really right, and we're no exception to that. But it is already there.
Okay, we've got one here.
Hi, my name is Deepika Singh, and most of our discussion tonight has been sort of centered around the United States and our country, and I'm really curious whether any of you have done research or looked at adoption of technology in the financial space outside of the United States. Canada is almost too close, but I'm really curious even further Europe somewhere, because they seem to be more liberal about security and privacy and things like that. So
well, I wouldn't say Europe is more liberal about security and privacy. I'd say we are. I know in my role I spend a large part of the year traveling the world. We have researchers all over the world. Yes, there are variations, but I guess a couple of cautions I would put out there. There's always a tendency to say, I am unique. Nobody can ever really understand me. And I know a lot of countries do that. A lot of country managers on our team do that. But there really are a lot of global commonalities. And I think I know our team is struggling to figure out how we map the commonalities in a non-regional way. It makes sense that we have headquarters located regionally. I'm guessing you guys are probably very similar. But the fact that a country is close to one another, the fact that a country is in the same time zone as another one, makes for easier management, but doesn't mean that they are similar. So we spend a lot of our effort connecting the dots and saying things like, for us in particular, the types of work we do, US, UK, and Australia are all fairly similar, at least in the dimensions we care about. But Germany has very different payment systems, so we have to treat Germany very differently. But without going into all the complexity, yes, there is a lot of complexity there.
So Bank of the West is owned by BNP Paribas, so headquartered in France and sort of I think the fourth largest bank in the world, operating retail entities around Western Europe and into Africa. So they operate a shared community practice in the digital space, which is really exciting to see. So we sort of do the best practice sharing and do look for those common threads. And I'd say in the servicing, it's more common than you would think. Although there's fundamental banking differences. I mean, Europe has moved away from checks long ago, right? They can't believe that we still have checks, and it's fun.
They can't believe we have swipe credit cards.
They can't believe we have swipe credit cards. That's true. So I would say the U.S. is much slower to adopt some of these things, but they also have very different. They have a very other aspects of payments and money movement that come out. So, for example, if you have nationalized utilities, right? You have direct debit from your account with the utility. You don't write a check, you don't do online bill pay, it's just direct debit because it's one single utility. I mean, think about how many local municipal utility companies we have in the United States. It's just, we're structured very, very differently. So their sense of the amount of payments and bill payment that they have to do in a given month is very different than ours.
To build on that point, I was shocked, Jamie, by your number about the percentage of people that
in America that are doing online banking. Outside of my grandma, I thought everybody else was on. But as we just kind of mentioned, in Europe, in Asia, micropayments, mobile payments are far more prominent than they are in the US. Is there anything about any of those models that you see influencing the adoption of mobile payment in North America? Is there anything, any trend, anything that we can learn from, anything that we can leverage to make that a much more accessible payment mechanism in North America?
Well, I can start. I mean, I'm gonna, this is, I think as you're traveling the world, you've probably seen this more firsthand. I mean, I think the most interesting phenomenon out in the world today is what's happened in Africa with the cell phone as a payment vehicle and having it tied essentially to your cell phone account. And it's an interesting, I mean, it's really fascinating to see it and watch how that's taken off. But it offsets, a different issue, an infrastructure issue, a landline issue where swipe terminals don't work without connectivity. So it's sort of, it's an innovative solution to a different problem. I don't know that ISIS is the cell phone consortium that's going to have a mobile wallet. But nonetheless, there's still, even if ISIS were successful, it still is faced with the same challenges of POS devices, proliferation of the phones that are NFC enabled, to see that move. So I don't know that those dynamics are pushing the U.S. In any particular direction. And you probably have more firsthand.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. In general, yes, we see with technology, it's often interesting to watch more developing countries because they're able to leapfrog existing infrastructures. If you think about the mobile phone development in general in Africa, phone leapfrogged the landline technology, went straight to mobile phone technology. I think we're going to see this, but I don't know yet where. I don't know where we're going to see it. I am working on preparing a study in Turkey. So what I'm hearing is that Turkey is very interesting in terms of changing nature of commerce. But I haven't been there yet. Don't know.
We good? I have the last question right here.
My name is Daniel. I'm with T-Lab Creative Agency. I do have one question about parity between mobile apps and regular online. Is the ultimate goal to make it so that you have complete parity between your mobile device and, say, like a typical PC? I noticed, like, for instance, on Bill Pay with Bank of America, you can't enter in new payees on the mobile device, but you can on the PC. So basically, is the ultimate goal to have that parity, or do you always see there's going to be differences between, like, the mobile device and the PC? Or the desktop.
It's tricky. I mean, Jamie touched on it before, and I kind of did too. Where it's difficult because you have the same back-end system that can be inflexible. Fiserv, the other one. There's like a handful of vendors, so it's like a decoupling where if you want to have parity across devices, there has to be so much work done on the front end. It's like a 5 or 10 year initiative to do that. And it's not that we're not doing that, it just takes a lot of time. So at least speaking for Union Bank, we are doing that, but it's a big process just to be able to decouple like the presentation, the behavior layer of code so that we can do responsive design and get close to a point where you could be able to do all the things that you would be able to on a desktop, on a mobile phone, in a non-native app.
Yeah, and I think, I can speak for BofA on their strategy and probably, most likely how we'll pursue it at Bank of the West. But it's really, you're absolutely right to call out the fact that there's clearly not parity today. So it'll kind of cascade down the primary tasks. So add a payee, add a P2P contact. But I don't think that it'll be a long, long time before you get to full parity within the apps themselves, and I'm not sure technology itself may evolve to where you've got more of a thin client, front end, a thin client app with a responsive design system behind it that is accessing to get that full parity. But if you take relatively infrequent activities, say check reorder, do you really need to build check reorder into your mobile application? And is that work? You do? All right. Okay. So, versus point being, obviously, are you going to reorder checks on your handset? Right. Tablet's a very different story. Tablet's just a untethered PC, right? And you can access, you can bridge from the app into a mobile web experience very, very easily for a lot of those things. So I don't know that the banks will make those investments because it's hard to justify. It'll be hard to justify coding it all within the app.
And I think I would add to this. I think the vision is device and use context parity. I don't think anybody ever wants to get to complete parity. But for the things that people want to do across all devices, they should be able to do across all devices. But in our case, for example, our merchants generally don't want to do complete reconciliation of a month's worth of transactions on a mobile phone. Might do it on a tablet, more likely to do it on a desktop. There are certain cases where access to the hardware is never going to give you parity. For example, a web browser interface on your phone does not have access to the camera. But the camera can do really interesting things in an app context in order to input new data, input new cards. So I would say parity where appropriate for the use context and appropriate for the device, absolutely. But it's not always going to be appropriate.
That's it, you guys. You did yourself. I want to thank Dr. Jim Hudson, David Armistead, and Sean Keane for being both awesome guest speakers participating in Los Angeles' World Usability Day.